Please subscribe to this channel for more videos related to Catholic Christian teaching. The physical essence of God is the totality of the divine perfections, which are factually identical among themselves. The enumeration of the divine attributes was conferred by the Fourth Lateran Council and the First Vatican Council. God's physical essence is simply the sum total of His perfection. The metaphysical nature of God is the basic determining factor of the divine essence. According to our analogical conception, it is the fundamental and ultimate basis of His divinity, which distinguishes it from all created things, and which is the source and origin of all the other divine perfections. Various opinions have been advanced in this point. The nominalists wrongly placed the metaphysical essence of God in the sum of all His perfections, and thus equate the physical and the metaphysical essence. The Scotists see the metaphysical essence of God in His radical infinity, that is, in that quality by which God possesses all perfections in infinite measure. This view, however, leaves unsolved the question of the final basis of the infinity. Infinity is a mode of being only, not the metaphysical essence itself. Many Thomists would find the metaphysical essence of God in His absolute intellectuality, which they define as absolute intellection. Absolute intellection presupposes absolute being. The opinion best founded in Scripture and tradition is that the metaphysical essence of God consists in its status as subsistent being, as distinct from created things which have received being from another being. God has His being of Himself and through Himself by virtue of His own perfection of essence. God is being itself, the absolute being, the subsisting being. In God, essence and existence coincide. The concept of absolute being excludes all non-being and all merely potential being. Consequently, God is pure act without any admixture of potentiality. This opinion, which follows the Thomistic definition, is held by many theologians who conceived the metaphysical essence of God to be aseity, which, however, is not to be understood in the negative sense of not having become or in being independent of a cause, since this is only a mode of being, but in the positive sense of self-actualization. Aseity is the property by which a being exists of and from itself. It refers to the belief that God does not depend on any cause other than Himself for His existence, realization, or end, and has within himself his own reason of existence. This represents God as absolutely independent and self-existent by nature. In Exodus chapter 3, God revealed His proper name and His essential name, I am who I am. That is, I am the one whose essence is expressed in the words, I am. God is therefore purely and simply being, He who is. His essence is being. Israel, however, did not yet grasp the full sense of the revelation bestowed upon it. It understood the name Yahweh as He who is always, the constant, the true, the helper, as He has shown Himself to be in the history of Israel. Later scriptural texts express the absolute being of God by designating Yahweh as the first and the last, as the Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end, He who is, who was, and who shall come. The Book of Wisdom chapter 13 verse 1, as does Exodus chapter 3 verse 14, calls God He who is, and contrasts Him with the visible things which have received being from Him. The characteristic of absolute being expressed in the name Yahweh distinguishes God from all being that is not God. I am the Lord, this is my name. I will not give my glory to another, nor my praise to graven things. The patristic writers and scholasticism take Exodus chapter 3 as their point of departure in their explanation of the divine essence, and regard absolute being as that accept by which we grasp the essence of God most fundamentally. St. Hilary, full of wonderment at the divine self-designation, says, nothing can be conceived which is more appropriate to God than being. St. Gregory of Nazianzus remarks on Exodus chapter 3, God was always, is, and will always be, or rather, He is always, for was and will be, are divisions of our time and of nature which is in constant flow. But He is the constant being, and thus He called Himself when He answered Moses on the mountain. He holds sealed off in Himself the whole fullness of being, which has neither a beginning nor an end, like an endless and boundless ocean of being, transcending every notion of time and created nature. St. Augustine, referring to Exodus chapter 3, says that God has called Himself being itself. He alone is the immutable being, which is the true being. St. John Damascene remarks that the name He who is the most appropriate of all the divine name. St. Bernard says, one may call God good or great or blessed or wise or whatever one will. All is contained in the phrase est, He is. St. Thomas teaches His, that is God's, essence is His existence. As only in God is essence one with existence, he sees in the name He who is the appropriate proper name of God. The concept of subsistent being itself fulfills all conditions necessary for the determination of the metaphysical essence of God. A subsistent being itself does not designate a mere mode of being, but that perfection which, according to our analogical thinking, is fundamental to God, and which is the summing up of His essence. Ipsum esse subsistens distinguishes God fundamentally from all created things which only possess being, but which are not being itself. The being of created things is a limited being, and in comparison with the being of God, it is more non-being than being. They cannot be compared with Him because they are from Him, but compared with Him they are not, because the true being is an immutable being, and that is He alone. Ipsum esse subsistens also distinguishes God from abstract or general being, for the latter is of such a nature that it has not any objective reality without the addition of further characteristics, while the absolute divine being is such that nothing can be added to it. Abstract being is the poorest concept in point of content, while absolute being is the richest. Ipsum esse subsistens is the root from which all the other divine perfections may logically be derived. As God is the absolute being, He must contain in Himself all the perfections of being. Nothing of the perfection of being can be lacking in Him who is subsistent being itself. Please go to YouTube Retimentality channel, playlist Dogma on God for the complete series of these materials.